A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen, respected dignitaries, esteemed guests, and dear students. We warmly welcome you all to the inaugural function of the International Conference on Implementing Peace Education for Viksit Bharat 2047, organized by the Department of Education, Mizoram University. Today we gather here not just to share ideas, but to sow the seeds of more peaceful and progressive India by 2047. When our nation completes 100 glorious years of independence, let's embark on this inspiring journey together. And to grace this inaugural function, we are privileged to have with us distinguished academicians and leaders who have tirelessly contributed to the field of education and beyond. I now take great pleasure in welcoming Professor Dibakar Chandradeka, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, our esteemed chief guest, Professor Jeremy Rinker from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, our keynote speaker for today, and Professor Lanundanga, Registrar, Mizoram University, our guest of honor, and Professor H. Malsawmi, Dean, School of Education, Mizoram University, and Professor Loknath Mishra, Head of the Department of Education. A warm welcome to each one of you, and let's give them a big applause of hands to welcome them. And ladies and gentlemen, the Department of Education, Mizoram University proudly organized this two-day international conference focusing on a theme that could not have been more timely and essential: implementing peace education for Viksit Bharat 2047. And the idea is to build a culture of peace, respect, and understanding in schools, colleges, and society. And the goal is to help India become strong, developed, and united by the year 2047 by including peace education in what we teach and how we teach. And we hope to guide young people to choose understanding instead of conflict, and togetherness instead of division. And to begin this beautiful morning on a melodious note, may I now invite the talented B.Ed student Lung Lutei with her to present the welcome song, and let's welcome her with a big round of applause.
Today I am going to sing a song called A Million Dreams. It is a song that speaks about imagination and hope and not giving up on our dreams. It reminds us, this song reminds us that with courage and love we can imagine and create a better world. I close my eyes and I can see a world that's waiting out for me, that I call my own. Through the dark, through the doors, through as no one been before, but it feels like home. They can say it all sounds crazy. They can say I've lost my mind. I don't care if they call me crazy. We can leave it a world that we design. 'Cause every night I lie in bed, and bright as colors fill my head, and million dreams are keeping me away. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the one I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. A million dreams for the world I'm gonna make. There's a house we can build, every room inside is filled with things from far away. Special things I could buy, each one that you smile on a rainy day. However big, however small, let me be part of it all. Share your dreams with me. You may be right, you may be wrong, but say that you bring me along to the world you see, to the world I close my eyes to see. I close my eyes to see. Every night I lie in bed, the brightest colors fill my head. A million dreams are keeping me awake. I think of what the world could be, a vision of the world I see. A million dreams is all it's gonna take. A million dreams for the world we're gonna make. A million dreams for the world we're gonna make. Thank you.
Thank you, our B.Ed student Lung Ludei, for that lovely rendition, and that was truly refreshing. So may I now invite the distinguished to kindly stand from their seat for the presentation of the bouquet as a token of our heartfelt welcome and respect. May I now request our head of the department, Professor Loknath Mishra, to kindly come forward and present a bouquet to our esteemed chief guest, Professor Dibakar Chandradeka, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, as a token of our warm welcome and respect. Thank you, sir. And also, may I now request our Dean, Professor H. Malsawmi, to kindly come forward and present a bouquet to our guest of honor, Professor Lanundanga, Registrar, MSATU. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. May I now request Professor Pujawalia to kindly come forward and present a bouquet to Professor Jeremy Rinker, University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. So we are going to invite our chief guest, Professor Dibakar Chandradeka, our Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University. And Professor Deka is a highly respected academician and researcher with an illustrious academic journey that includes an MSc in Organic Chemistry, MTech in Applied Chemistry, and a PhD from IIT Kharagpur. He is the first scholar to earn a DSc in Chemistry from Guwahati University. Professor Deka has successfully completed and led several national research projects and has an impressive record of nearly 90 research papers published in reputed international journals. As an esteemed member of the Expert Committee for Trilingual Science and Technology Terminology, he has contributed significantly to scientific advancement in multiple languages. With over 30 PhD scholars mentored under his able guidance, Professor Deka's contribution to education and research is truly inspiring. Sir, may I now request you to kindly deliver the chief guest address.
Good morning. Namaskar, Shivai to esteemed gathering here. Our respected guest, who will be the keynote speaker from America, Professor Jeremy Rinker. Our respected Registrar, Professor Lalunanga, Dean of the School of Education, Professor Malsawmi, and then our head of the Department of Education, Professor Mishra. I can see more guests on the dais, though I am not introduced. And all other colleagues present here, including CDC Director, DK, Professor DK, all my research scholar students present. And thank you all for an opportunity to talk to you this morning. And I feel fortunate that I got to speak to you, but to be frank, this was not in my agenda today. And Professor Mishra might have told me long back, I don't know, but in my meeting list, it was not there today. I was ready to go to airport after briefly attending the office. Then I got the call from Professor Mishra, and then I agreed, okay, if I can spare 10-15 minutes, there is nothing wrong. It's rather pleasure for me. So, it's a very important topic, nice to talk on that topic, but it will be purely extempore. Let me try, okay? No preparation, nothing. But topic is very common to all of us. Implementing peace education for Viksit Bharat. Viksit Bharat means develop India. Well, peace, I think, is the ultimate desire for humanity. It is the ultimate desire. Now, while we will be talking here about implementing peace education, now before implementation, we have to be sure about what are the factors that control the peace. Peace at individual level, peace at societal level, peace in the global level or country to country, all these things. So are we sure about the factors which control the peace? So I request the speaker to more emphasis on this part. If the diagnosis is not done properly, treatment of health or any disease is not possible. First is the diagnosis. Know the causes of the disease and the problem with the health. Then only treatment is possible. So implementation means we are going to implement how to achieve peace. That means are we sure about the factors? So I think experts who are invited, they must have a good volume of knowledge. They are learned person. So they will be able to talk on that implementation. And I believe they are sure about the factors which are associated with management of peace in different tiers of the society, individual, family, society, country, and finally the global level. So I'll be missing those things. Our keynote speaker is there, who is a renowned professor of peace and conflict studies. And I will request him to see why there is so much of conflict between India and Pakistan. Yeah, being sitting here, we would like to know. And Pakistan is an important neighbor, Bangladesh is an important neighbor, and of course China is equally important. But with none of these three countries, we are living in peace. And most of the causes of discomfort in India is these three countries. Okay, not America, UK, or Italy, Germany, or Japan. They are not. And these are the three countries who are the main causes. I don't know whether there is deficiency on our part also, on the part of India, whether we are unable to accommodate our neighbors. That is need to be studied. I don't blame only to them, but from our angle, of course, if I know my deficiency, I'll try to correct it. Probably I don't know my deficiency. As an Indian or a citizen of this country, probably we also have deficiency, no doubt. But that deficiencies have to be pointed out by third person, not by my enemies, not myself. So person like our honorable guest, Jeremy Rinker may be the right person to point out what is the problem with India, why they are unable to live in peace with Pakistan, China, or Bangladesh. I'd like to, so I'll be missing that things probably, because it is the third person who is the right person to judge between two conflicting countries. Neither two parties will not agree their deficiencies. That is okay. So anyway, implementation is certainly important, but more important to know about the root causes of conflict and lack of peace. In personal level, I would like to share my feeling is that with my experience, my observation, I feel that one reason is the ego is the most important reason. Ego is one of the most important reasons why we have conflict between families, husband, wife, or with elder, means any family member, why there is a divorce, separation. It is actually two persons are unable to accommodate each other. There is a point of disagreement, which is not, somehow we are unable to resolve, and that's why we separate each other. Then certainly issue of conflict is a much bigger between two countries. So in that respect, maybe how to discard ego, that education is very important. How we can discard my ego with my wife, whether I should agree with her or I should quarrel with her or do arguments with her. And if I agree, what is the problem? Okay, unwillingly I can agree certain issues with her. Then peace maybe I can buy, peace. Instead of debating, argument, I don't agree. But unwillingly I agree, okay, you are right. Rather let me live in peace. That may be an issue. So sometimes what happens, we always should speak truth. True. But sometimes to buy peace, we should lie also. Right? For the sake of peace. For example, we learn in a story, suppose one person is hunting. Suppose a terrorist extremist is hunting to kill a person. Now, person is running away. At the turning point, he may be asking, I am the, present on the scenery, he may be asking, which direction that person is gone. Okay, so at that point I know person is hiding there. I will not say. I will say the person is gone this way. Okay, so I am lying. I know where is the person is hiding. But I know the terrorist will kill him if I show him where he is hiding. Instead I can tell lie. Okay, no, he is not going this way, he is going that way. So terrorists will go diverted in a different direction. But at the time, person will be safe. So what is wrong in here to tell the lie? This story we know all of us, right? So that's why to buy peace sometimes, and in a smaller scale I say, you agree with, even if you disagree. And if the scope is not narrow, not larger, okay. This is one thing. Ego, I think, one is a major issue for losing peace.
And Professor Rinker is an eminent scholar in the field of peace and conflict studies with a research focus on peace building, collective trauma, and systems of oppression. He earned his PhD from the prestigious George Mason University's Institute for Conflict Analysis and Resolution in 2009. Additionally, he holds a master's degree in Asian religion from the University of Hawaii and a bachelor's degree in philosophy and political science from the University of Pittsburgh. Professor Rinker is widely recognized for his transdisciplinary research approach and served as the editor of the Journal of Transdisciplinary Peace Process. His contributions to understanding societal conflict and promoting peace process are highly valued across academic and policy-making platforms. Sir, it is a privilege to have you with us today, and may I now invite you to deliver the keynote address.
Okay, so I can walk around. So thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm glad to be here, and thanks for all the nice introductions from everyone. And I appreciate the opportunity to be a second time here at MZU in the Department of Education. So how do I flip through? Okay, good, very good. So I like to use slides a little bit because I know my American English is probably a little quicker and different than most people are used to hearing. So some of what I'll say is going to be here up on the slide. I also will apologize in advance. I've been having some chest congestion in my throat, so I might cough or stop. That's okay. I'll come back. So just hang tight and hold with me, please. So as I was introduced, my name is Jeremy Rinker. I am an associate professor and co-chair, or you guys call department head. I have one other department head who works with me for the Department of Peace and Conflict Studies at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. We're the only Peace and Conflict Studies department in the state of North Carolina. We do not have a PhD program, but we have a BA and an MA degree program at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. So I always like to start out by saying, so this is my university. Today I prepared a talk based on the paper I presented, one of those 123, I think you said, Dr. Mishra, the papers that came. And my paper was entitled Assessing Pathways for Peace, Ripeness, Political Opportunity Structures, and Remembering Collective Trauma, which is something I've worked quite a lot on as key factors in effective peace pedagogy. And so I wanted to start out by saying a couple things about me. You see me here in person. This is my picture, obviously. That tells you who I am and where I'm from. I always like to know where you all are from, and I know you're coming from all over India. So it's a pleasure to be here with so many different people from different parts of India. So you know where I'm from. Most people don't know the states of the United States. When I say North Carolina, people go, huh? They don't understand where that is. I found that even in institutions of higher learning, most of the parts of the United States geography are not well known. I've actually had the privilege of traveling across parts of India and have a pretty good understanding of the states. I haven't been to all the states of India, but I have a pretty good understanding of where a state lies in India. So North Carolina is here. I circled it on the map, so it's on the East Coast. Greensboro is so this is the Atlantic coast. We're about 3 hours we're about somewhere here, about 3 hours, 3.5 hours drive from the coast of North Carolina. So North Carolina is a coastal state. One of the early states, one of the first states I grew up in is actually Virginia, which is right above it. So I grew up, my home is near Washington, D.C., so the capital of the country is here. Washington, D.C. is very much like Delhi. It's a federal city. It was cut from two states, Maryland and Virginia, to make the state of Virginia. I grew up on the Arlington, I grew up in Arlington, Virginia, which is the piece of the state that was cut away to make Washington, D.C., and then when Lafont, the French designer of the city of Washington, D.C., designed the city, he designed it on the Maryland side of the river, the Potomac River, and he gave back to Virginia that land. So I grew up literally on the land that would have been Washington, D.C., had he built on that side. And that's about a 5-hour drive from here down to Greensboro, crossing through the state of Virginia. So when I go, my family is still up in Virginia. I go back and forth. So I just like to give that perspective, because when I've been here, and I think on this stage last time I was here, I made the point that I teach at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Most people say University of North Carolina, and they know the Tar Heel Blue because of Michael Jordan, who played basketball at the University of North Carolina before he went on to play at Chicago. So let me move on. Oh, sorry. So the basic argument of what I want to try to talk about today is that we have to use action and experience, not just values education to teach peace, to do peace pedagogy. So learning through doing that considers on-the-ground histories and realities of collective grievance, I am arguing is more effective than simply learning about values of those who succeeded in advocating for peace and nonviolence. I think too often in the field of peace and conflict studies or peace education, we get caught in talking about Gandhi or Martin Luther King, and they're great people, they had amazing insights, but we get too caught in that and not thinking about what it was they did. We get focused on what their values were without associating what they actually did in terms of action. So in making this argument, I hope to point to the need for actionable skills in conflict analysis and intervention. And as the Vice Chancellor said, like a disease, conflict does need to be diagnosed. So I went to the to George Mason University, to what's now called the Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter School for Peace and Conflict Studies. And there we talk a lot about conflict analysis and resolution. You have to have the analysis or the diagnosis, as the Vice Chancellor called it, before you can have the interaction and the action and the intervention. And so those two things go hand in hand. I'm arguing that those actionable skills in conflict analysis and intervention are foundational for what I'm going to call critical peace education, effective critical peace education. And I'll define that term in a second. And so I do this with reference to 3 sets of literature in my field, one of which is coming from me personally, the last one, but the first 2 are coming from famous peace and conflict studies scholars. A guy named Zartman in 1989 wrote about conflict ripeness, that conflict like a banana gets ripe. Just like a banana gets ripe, you don't eat it right when you pick it up. You wait till it gets to the ripeness, right? He talked about how conflict needs to be ripe for intervention. So I'm using that idea. I'm also using Sidney Taro's ideas on political opportunity structures. Taro was a political scientist who argued about political opportunity, that there are, similar to ripeness, there are moments in political environments where intervention can be had. And then the last set of theories is actually related to something that I've been doing, and I'll show that book at the end. I've been writing about it's collective historical trauma. I think my field of peace and conflict studies has moved too fast, especially with the interests, needs, and not focusing enough on shared emotion. And so I've been arguing that for some time. So I hope to apply this argument to examples of effective critical peace education in use in the local histories of higher education classrooms. So what is critical peace education? I take this definition from Bajaj and Hansopoulos. What distinguishes critical peace education from regular peace education is that critical peace educators pay attention to how unequal social relations and issues of power must inform peace. So you can't just talk about values without talking about power and justice. That's what critical peace educators are, critical peace educators. So notice this definition of critical peace education foregrounds the idea of action, the idea of doing something, right? We're not just talking about values and thinking about how great peace is and sitting in meditative poses. We're actually going out and doing something, right? We're intervening in conflicts. So that's how I think of critical peace education. And I think foundational to this is Kolb's 1984 discussion of experiential learning. So in the United States, and in my program, we use a lot of experiential learning. In other words, we try to instill what it is to be peace educators, what it is to create peace and conflict studies by actually having students practice it, right? By having them do the work, right? And so experiential learning is this idea of kind of cycling through concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and then active experimentation. And so in the classroom, that might look like doing role play activities, having students play people from Pakistan and India, and how would you bring them together in a context and work out and dialogue the differences you have between each other, right? So that's kind of experiential education. I think that's critical to what we talk about as critical peace education. As experiential peace education must involve action, right? Kolb's model of experiential learning articulates that we are constantly learning through doing throughout our life cycle, that we have to be doing something in order to actually internalize it. So when students are in the classroom learning about peace education, if we're just talking about the values of peace as being good, that oftentimes kind of goes right over their head. They need to see it in action. They need to actually experience it, right? So theoretical ideas such as collective historical trauma, ripeness, and political opportunity structures, they provide the heuristic foundations to test this learning. So they're not the only examples, but they're examples of theories that we can put forward to students and tell them to test them. My students are often asking, well, how do I solve conflict? What's the silver bullet to solve conflict? And I have to tell them all the time, there is no silver bullet, right? Every conflict is unique. There are some things that are similar across conflicts. And so using theory to do that is important, I think, in our field. Too many of the past comparisons of Indian and American peace education, pedagogy, and practice fall back on tropes and narratives of spirituality and devotion to past giants of nonviolent action, e.g. Gandhi and King, as I mentioned before. And I would argue that they missed the forest from the trees. If you're familiar with that idiom, miss the forest from the trees. It means that you're missing the wider picture by focusing in on one specific tree and not seeing the entire forest, right? The failure to appreciate and memorialize what I consider local histories of social conflict undermines the work of long-term critical peace education. If we're not talking about those past histories, the local histories of Aizawl and Greensboro, where I'm living, attest to this. And so a couple of examples that I want to bring into the room are examples of conflict in the past and how we need, as critical peace educators, to be talking about them. If we're not talking about them, people forget about them and history repeats itself. Failure to engage the core experiences of past trauma and violence undermines the goal of critical peace education. So that's really what I aim to argue. I aim to get you thinking about, that we need to be engaging with local histories and histories that are sometimes uncomfortable in order to get people to engage with what happened and how we can move forward and to make sure that it doesn't happen again, to make sure we can move forward in peace. So these are the two examples that I want to bring into the room. You probably know the Mizo National Front, right, and the history of Mizoram's conflict. You know it better than I do. I don't know this history very well. In fact, it's kind of difficult to find some of this history. But the history of conflict in this region is here, right? In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was lots of conflict. Many of those folks are now older. You're losing that history. I would say you need to find those older people and capture that history before it disappears, because otherwise it might reoccur. The same thing can be said, these other pictures come from a story I'll tell about Greensboro. And oftentimes in Greensboro, some of the leadership doesn't want to hear the story. They say, oh, it's bad for business. We don't want to hear this story. We don't want people to know Greensboro from this story. But I think it's an important story to tell. So I'm saying that local, and it actually happened in the same years as when the conflict in Mizoram was happening. We were also having some local conflict in Greensboro. Local histories matter and provide political opportunity for ongoing peace pedagogy. Knowing when it's ripe to interrogate these histories is important, but failure to interrogate them will inevitably lead to conflict. So I want to repeat that. It's important to interrogate the histories, but knowing when to do it, when's the political opportune moment to do it is important, but if we forget them, we will relive them. And nobody wants to relive the violence and trauma of some of the past. So you know this history of the Mizo National Front, 20 years of conflict that ended in the 1986 peace accords here. When I came to Mizoram last time, the only evidence I really saw of this was in the museum downtown. There's some pictures and some evidence of it. And in the government building that the Indian government never gave up. They barricaded. The barricades that they put up at that time are still standing. The walls that they built are still there. Other than that, I had difficulty finding this history. I was asking people, where is this history? Where did it go? And similarly, if you go to Greensboro, these other pictures are coming from an event that happened in 1979. So I know you're probably not at all familiar with that story. So let me focus on that story and talk about what happened. So on November 3rd, 1979, what became known as the Greensboro Massacre happened. And then in 2003, there was a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So this picture's from 2003. These pictures this is actually from 2003. This one is actually the original poster of the Death to the Klan March. So the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, a white supremacist organization. There was a group of communist worker parties. There was a group of interracial white and black workers who were organizing, and they organized under the banner of the Communist Workers' Party, and they put on a march, and they called it Death to the Klan, which they have admitted since was not a good idea. Not a good way to frame your contention necessarily. But what happened on November 3rd is the march never happened. They were getting ready for the march. They were preparing signs, and they were going to march through the city. They had talked to the local authorities and gotten permission to march through the city. Then they're getting ready that morning, and the Ku Klux Klan from outside of the city drove in a caravan of cars, about 10 cars they drove in. People saw that they had Confederate flags on the back of their license plates. They realized it was the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, and they started banging on the cars. The Klan stopped the cars, got out, popped the trunk of the car, pulled out guns, and I will say that people in the Communist Worker Party also had guns. So it became a bit of a shootout, but the 5 people who died, who are pictured here, were all coming from the Communist Workers' Party. Not a single Klan person was hurt. And the police were absent, completely absent. In fact, the Klan in the car had an FBI, a Federal Bureau of Investigations informant in the car who did nothing. This happened in 88 seconds. It happened very quickly. So 88 seconds went by, 5 people are dead, right? The city tried to say that this never happened. The city tried to forget this history. But the organizer of this march was a guy named, and in fact, when you guys were staying in Greensboro, you stayed around the corner from Nelson Johnson's church. Nelson Johnson later became a pastor, a minister. But he was the organizer of this. And actually, just about 3 months ago, Nelson Johnson passed away. Nelson Johnson organized this march and went to the city, got the permits, did everything he had to do, but no police was present. And he didn't let that story go. He hung on to the story. He kept telling the story. The survivors of these people who were shot and killed kept telling the story. And it took till 2003 for them to inaugurate a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So they had a big conference, and they brought in Klan members, they brought in police officers, they brought in everybody to testify about what happened, right? They had many testimonies over about a year process. Eventually what happened, and it took until 2017 the city finally agreed to put a marker up to commemorate this event. So now there is a marker in Greensboro that announces that this event happened. But it took until 2017. This story was also almost lost to history, because if you notice, it was November 3rd, 1979. And when I teach this case to my students, I say, does anybody know what happened on November 4th, 1979? And they say, no, I don't know. It's too far back in history for them. And on November 4th, if you know your history, it's the day that the U.S. hostages were taken in Iran. All the way around the world in the country of Iran, American hostages were taken prisoner. So imagine this story in Greensboro is the national news story on November 3rd. On November 4th, it disappears. It's nowhere to be seen. So it almost got lost to history. I say that telling these stories is very important because it builds peace. It trains people in how to think about critical peace pedagogy. So this is coming from a slide that when I talk about my book, and I'll say a few things about my book, this is, for me, a kind of set of models or theories that help me think about how we do critical peace education. The theoretical roots of my practice are very much this model of the nested model of conflict. This comes from Marie Dugan, and the citation for that is at the bottom of this slide. She wrote about racial conflict in schools and tried to understand, how do I intervene in racial conflicts between white and African American and white kids who are fighting in a school system near my home, actually. And she says that I can either attack at the issue level, the relationship level, the subsystem level, or the system level. So the issue level would be the actual issue that got the fight to start in the first place. The relationship would be between the boys, the African American boys and the white boys, right? Or if you thought about the Greensboro massacre, you could use this model of this nested model to map that for the Greensboro massacre. The subsystem level would be, in the Greensboro massacre case, it would be the city of Greensboro. How do we engage those parties? And then the system level would be racial dynamics in the United States, the national level in some ways, right? And she eventually decides in her own interventions to go from the issue level, but she talks about conflict as being nested, that they're nested in this kind of, almost like an egg, right, is nested. I have added this stuff at the bottom, like a bird thatches a nest. I have added, while conflict is nested in issues, relationships, subsystems, and systems, each of these nests are thatched via what I would call trauma and emotional resonance. Conflict resolution professionals, peace educators, critical peace educators often miss the way in which emotions and trauma are foundational to the nest. So I think of Dugan's model as like an egg more than a nest. And it's almost as if you have this egg with no nest, it will fall over. This nest is foundational to understanding how to engage in conflict. We have to engage trauma and emotions in order to do that. So I call this, and I don't have this slide here with me, but I went through a training at Eastern Mennonite University. Mennonite's a Christian church tradition where it's called the STAR model. They talk about strategies for trauma awareness and resilience, STAR. And in that model, they talk about cycles of violence and how do you break cycles of violence. In order to do that, you have to create what I call transitional justice mechanisms, some spaces and structures for people to engage in active dialogue, active conversation, active engagement. It's not just about saying, hey, this great peaceful thing happened. These are great values of peace, but it's actually showing those values of peace in action that is critical for this transitional justice mechanisms. So I argue that we need to create spaces, processes, structures to remember, memorialize, create contact, dialogue, and restory traumatic histories. Because oftentimes when trauma happens, a party tells a story, the winning party tells a story that's not absolutely correct, right, about that history. You might know this in terms of the Mizoram conflict, right? There's a particular narrative about that conflict, and some people might tell a different narrative. So there's a need to continually restory. I think this is a process, these transitional justice mechanisms and creating those spaces and structures are critical for critical peace education. They're vitally important to create critical peace education. So this is the book that I wrote in 2024. It's called The Guide to Trauma-Informed and Emotionally Mindful Conflict Practice. If you want to learn more, it's on Amazon. You can find it. This picture actually is taken by a good friend of mine who's a social work professor. And it's actually taken from Israel and Palestine, with one of the churches in Bethlehem, and how the light is coming in the window. I like that imagery for what I was trying to talk about. So that's the book that I've written some of these ideas in. I've been thinking about how do we engage with trauma and emotions in conflict practice. The basic argument that I'm making in this book is that my field of peace and conflict studies has focused too much on interests, needs, rational choice. There's an assumption in conflict oftentimes that actors are rational. And we all know that when people get in conflict, they get angry, they get upset, their emotions raise. Oftentimes, they're not acting rationally, right? And so what I'm trying to kind of argue in this book is to say, my field has missed emotions and trauma as really important parts of conflict escalation and de-escalation. And so we can say critical peace education, if you will. So some kind of concluding thoughts on navigating the challenges to creating effective critical peace education or pedagogy. I'm repeating myself to some extent. We need to be aware of local histories, local collective traumas, and moments of ripeness for change. Justice is normative. It's about norms and values. Politics is value-laden. Critical peace educators must realize that standing on values do not make them unscientific or illegitimate as researchers or teachers. This is a kind of anti-intellectual move, I think, by many politicians. And so values are important. I'm not saying that we should forget our peace values. Values are important. The value of nonviolence is important, right? But we can't just stand on those alone. We need to focus on action, agency, and experience as opportunities for modeling how peace can actually be achieved. So effective critical peace education involves knowing local histories and putting values into action, not just talking about values, but putting values into action. So that's just in some ways reiterating that definition I gave before of critical peace education. Regular peace education doesn't really involve justice, doesn't really engage justice. I shouldn't say involve, but engage justice. But critical peace education does engage with issues of justice. And so sometimes those conversations can be uncomfortable, but I think we need to, as peace educators, be sure to ask them, to tell them, to restory what we think of as the past. And so with that, I'll thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions or dialogue about what I've said at any point during the next 2 days. So thank you for inviting me to the conference. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, sir, for such a thought-provoking and insightful address. Thank you so much. So we are going to invite Professor Lalundang, Registrar of Mizoram University, to deliver his address as guest of honor. He is a distinguished academician in the Department of Forestry, Mizoram University. Apart from his present role as registrar, he has served in key positions like Director of UGC, HRDC, and Director of IQSC at Mizoram University. Sir, may we now invite you.
Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Our Chief Guest, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Dekar in absentia, and the guest of honor, Professor Jeremy from University of North Carolina, and Professor Malsawmi, the Dean of School of Education, and Professor Loknath, the head of the department, Professor Lalbi Digidhamte, the director of CDC, and all other esteemed speakers, my colleague here in the department, and Professor Mohanty, the head of the Department of Sociology, and students, scholars. Yes, first of all, I must congratulate the department that they are conducting this kind of international conference. So when I came to know about the topic itself, as Honorable Vice Chancellor has mentioned, that these are the peace education. So we heard many a times a peace, but I came to know about the peace education very recent. But while going through the peace education, so it seems like it is an important topic. But I don't have any knowledge about the peace education. So I'm from a science background. In science, what we are mostly focused whenever we are doing any experiments, so we focus mainly on the end product. While we are doing some chemical reaction, so what would be the end product? So we try to achieve, to get, so exactly what we are supposed to at the end. So while talking about the peace education also, to my understanding, education is, I think you all agreed with me that may not be just having a degree, different degree like a UG degree or a PG degree or these are PhD scholars. But the main focus would be what would be the end product. So what would be the end product and what would be the quality of the end product. So whether we achieve it, what we are supposed to. So that is what we are focusing on in science. I think in education also this would be the same. So if it is so just not to mere producing graduated students, but we want to have an end product of a complete human being. Complete human beings means individual. We just try to create each and every individual as a complete human being. So while talking about a complete human being, you all know very well, because being an educationist, so what you focus on a complete human being. So in terms of education, not only having a degree, they must be an unemployable. So they have to have a kind of an attitude that they are a graduate students, they are a postgraduate students, they are a scholars. So when we are doing a convocation, so the slogan that while offering the degree by the Vice Chancellor, so at the end, so you must be very well know about these things, that show yourself worthy of the same. So this is what we are talking about, the end products. So whether our end products has achieved, whether they can show themselves worthy of what they attained, what they have learned all through this education. So this is what I'm linked with this a peace education. So I'm not very much aware of this very topic, even then as a layman. So when we talk about peace, so there may be so many theories, as Professor Jenkins. So I have a privilege to visit your university 20 years back in North Carolina. But not exactly, this is not the what you're coming from, I think maybe other campus. So I have a privilege to speak with the students also by that time. Anyway, when this Professor this Jeremy has mentioned all these theories and definitions, so I may not be very much aware, I'm sorry, because I'm not in that field. But while talking about the peace, education, so I have my own, to understand that, so if we focus mainly on the individuals, because VC Sir has mentioned that diagnostic is important. Whenever we are doing any research, so we need to identify, so what is the problem we are facing. So talking about the peace also, there may be a conflict, there may be a hatred, so even there may be a war. Something like that, I think if we can identify what is the main problem, and then the cause, and then how to solve the problem. So this is what the research really says about. So we need to do on research like this. So the individual, what to say, as I said, that the individual peace, or I do not know the term exactly like, if everyone is having a peace within himself or herself, so I think at the society level, peace may be created. For that, though, education is very important then. Focusing on the Viksit Bharat also, we need to develop the country. So that is why they are focusing on education. Let us try to educate the people first. So in terms of a peace education also, let us try to educate each and every individuals to have a peace within himself, herself, and then with others in the society itself. I do not know what would be the main factors or the strategy as such. But as an educationist, I think we need to work together with psychologists or a clinical psychologist, or even a sociologist like Professor Mohanty. So it may be interdisciplinary kind of approach. So that whenever we are trying to have a peace education, just to make an individual like a peace physically, mentally, and even spiritually. So if we can create these three main factors to each and every individual. So to me, personally as a layman, why not peace on earth? Why not peace on the society? Why not peace even in the campus itself? So to educate each and every individuals, I think if we focus on that. For that though, I have gone through some of the papers, the topic over here. And as an university, what we can do is to incorporate in our curriculum. I don't know whether you have already done or not, like not only to the education department. If we can offer this peace education as a, what to say, like I think they might be knowing these are minor multidisciplinary minor papers. If we can offer as a multidisciplinary minor papers so that other department can opt for this peace education. Not only to the School of Education, I think you may extend that this curriculum may be taken by other departments also, so that if you can incorporate the curriculum for this multidisciplinary minor subject. So I don't have much to say. So thank you for inviting me, and thank you for giving me this bag. Because why I'm wearing this bag? Because Professor Jankin has received different colors, is it? And these VCs are also having another color. Why I'm wearing is this? Because we are very much concerned these days about matching. Oh, you see, this is very matching with my dress and white and black. That's why I'm wearing this gift. Thank you so much once again. And in the coming days, though Professor Mahanti is sitting here, but still I'm saying this. If this Mizoram University can concentrate more on this integrated education program, if the university concentrate more on the subject like architecture and like psychology and clinical psychology, I hope that if we could have these 3 or 4 departments our signature of this Mizoram University, I hope that would be, good for the university in the coming days. So with that, I wish once again this international conference a very, very grand success. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your motivating address. Coming to the end of this inaugural function, to express our heartfelt gratitude, I now call upon Professor Lelbiak Dikinamte, Director, CDC, Mizoram University.
Thank you, Mapui, for giving me this opportunity to propose vote of thanks. Please bear with my voice. This very husky voice came all of a sudden yesterday, and I was thinking maybe I will not be able to speak today, but somehow I am able to stand here before you to again propose vote of thanks. I always say that my department never allows me to think, rather they want me to thank. So I'm not a thinker, I'm a thanker when it comes to the Department of Education, because I'm always given that opportunity to give a vote of thanks. Today we were honored by the presence of Professor Deka, who is our Vice Chancellor. He was very busy, as we all know. He has to rush off to the airport. And at the same time, out of the 5 Vice Chancellors that we had so far, I think he is the one whom we feel very close to, because he was always open to any of the things that we want to share with him. And when he said that today was not in his agenda because he was not reminded, or that it was not put in his calendar, but he came to the department, which shows that he was really, attached to all the departments, and he doesn't want to say no to any of our requests. So I want to thank him for that. And when he talked about lying to prevent conflict, I was thinking, he was also talking about truth, and when the truth is going to harm others, then maybe we have to, not tell the truth all the times. If someone tells me, you are very ugly, I will be very, very hard. So instead of saying that, even if it's a small lie, oh, you look very pretty today. So we feel happy and we feel peaceful. So maybe that was what our Vice Chancellor wants to tell us when he talks about lying in order to maintain peace. And I always, like when Professor Rinker talks about peace. And when it was mentioned that he is an expert in peace and conflict study, I was thinking it's a very conflicting thing. Peace and conflict. The topic itself shows 2 conflicting things. And when you talk about collective trauma, I was able to recall the time of that very difficult time that Mizoram faced during 1966 to 86. We are very much part of that collective trauma-affected people, generation, I should say. We grew up in that traumatic era. And that has I will talk individually, that has made us think that Indians, I will call it as Indians, please don't mind. Indians are bad people. Because they attacked us. Because Indian government bombed Mizoram. And that collective trauma was always with us. And recently, there was one writer who put it in another way. He said, we claimed independence. So why why should we say that India bombed us? India bombed its own citizen. India bombed someone who is trying to go away from its grip. And we have claimed independence. That means India did not bomb Indians. He bombed foreigners. So he was putting it in another way of thinking, which I feel can somehow settle the previous thought that India bombed us. What I'm trying to say here is that in order to, have some peaceful thinking, we have to have empathy. Empathy is something that we always talk about, but we always say that you should put yourself in another one's shoes. We want people to wear our shoes, but we don't want to wear their shoes. So empathy is also from both sides. And when we talk about empathy, we should not try to, to compel others to wear our shoes, whereas we don't want to wear their shoes. So that again comes up with some conflicts. And Professor Loknath, he is always a man who is, now we are associating him with peace education. And he's the one, the brain behind all this peace education, and in the SPARC project that he had, where he was able to get the service of Professor Rinker also. And he is the brain behind all these things with these objectives. But one thing that I want to share here is that we talk about peace, but are we conveying peace? Are we practicing peace? I'm not talking about Professor Loknath here. I'm speaking about the whole department, we as teachers. So when we talk about pedagogy, like Professor Rinker has said, collective trauma is affecting our pedagogy, the peaceful pedagogy that we may try to inculcate in our students. We want our students to learn about peace, whereas we don't treat them peacefully. So we as teachers, the theory that we are teaching, we have to put into practice. And Professor Nundanga also has rightly talked about the peace education, although he is not from our department, he's not from education, he's from forestry, and he has science background. And sometimes I used to pity people from science background because they are not allowed to study beyond the content. Whereas we in education, we can study anything within, whatever is within the sun. We are able to study that, whether it is in the technology, whether it is in environmental education, peace education, we have human rights education, we have value education, which we have put in multidisciplinary courses also. So, if with the goodwill of the registrar, I think that peace education can also be a part of our multidisciplinary. Not only that, maybe we can organize some few seminars which will include all the students. Maybe at the level of the students' council also, we can organize talks and lectures, not as credit-wise lectures as such. So with that, I would like to request our registrar also to think on that line, that maybe we can call all our students in the auditorium, talk about peace. And like I said, when we talk about peace and when we talk about pedagogy, let us put into practice what we preach. And peace is not only the absence of violence, but also the presence of, peaceful coexistence. When we talk about that, as I've said, it is empathy from both sides. Not only urging people to have empathy, but trying to understand others. So with these few words, I want to thank each and every of the participants, those who come from outside Mizoram and those who are from inside Mizoram. Let's hope that these 2 days that we have this seminar, we will be able to come out with a more peaceful mind and try to, live a peaceful life and start from ourselves. If we start from ourselves, peace begins in the mind of the people. So let us all try to live peacefully and share to the world that peace can be achieved only when we individuals have peaceful mindset. Thank you all.